Greetings from Tuscany, where I've traveled to the place of Machiavelli's exile, where he wrote The Prince and his other works. I'm going to show you in a while the exact study that he wrote his Prince in. But today I want to comment on one of the most famous private letters written in modernity and my favorite piece of writing by Machiavelli. It was Machiavelli in exile who just finished The Prince, writing a letter to his friend describing his day right here in this village and on these very grounds that we're walking. He describes how in the morning he wakes up, he goes to check on his wood cutting business, goes and haggles with people. He's a bit impoverished at this point, so he needs all the money he can get. And then he says how he goes to the inn, gets some food and some drink, this very inn right here, where the outer walls are preserved from the time of Machiavelli, and you can still come and have dinner and lunch, as I'm going to tonight. And how he plays cards with his friends. He haggles and swears, and it's all crude and very vulgar. And he says that even though they're just arguing over pennies, playing cards, again, right here, they can be heard shouting from miles away. Now, the reason I like that so much, we're now moving on across the road into his residence. The reason I like that so much is because Machiavelli combines a kind of deep seriousness with a kind of childlike levity that is very rare. Machiavelli, again, was exiled. All of his projects that he fought his entire life for, the liberty of Florence, his own political projects, his own political career was down the drain. And he was here in this house, which I'm going to take you to very shortly, writing The Prince. And he meant The Prince as this great, ambitious world historic work. So that's the seriousness, okay? He meant business. He had eternal glory in sight. But also, as the example goes to show of the card playing and the vulgar jokes, he also had a levity for someone who was just sentenced to die. And you can see this in Machiavelli's works as well, because not only did he write some of the most important political treatises of his time, he also wrote these self-satirical, self-deprecating comedies, The Mandrake, which was performed for the Medicis, and other comedies as well. And I was just interviewing one of the top Italian Machiavelli scholars, and he said, can you imagine any other great political theorist of modernity who's capable of writing a world historic treatise, writing a self-deprecating comedy that was actually really good? A Locke, a Hobbes, certainly not a Hegel, right? I mean, the closest we can get to is probably Rousseau. But anyways, that's what I loved about the beginning of his letter, the beginning of his day, which showed that despite his seriousness, he had a kind of levity. And I find that combination very attractive, not just in my friends, but also in the virtues I'm trying to cultivate. But the next part, is my favorite passage in all of Machiavelli, which I will read to you, word for word. When evening has come, I return to my house and go into my study, okay? It's this study right here, which we're gonna go into, that he wrote The Prince. At the door, I take off my clothes of the day, okay? These are his work clothes that he's been in the woods and haggling with people over, covered with mud and mire, and I put on my regal and courtly garments, and decently reclothed, I enter the ancient courts of ancient men, where received by them lovingly, I feed on the food that alone is mine, and that I was born for. There I am not ashamed to speak with them and to ask them the reason for their actions, and they in their humanity reply to me. We're now in his study. He wrote The Prince right here. And for the space of 4 hours, I feel no boredom, I forget every pain, I do not fear poverty, death does not frighten me. I deliver myself entirely to them, and because Dante says that to have understood without retaining does not make knowledge, I have noted what capital I have made from their conversation and have composed a little work, The Prince. He wrote this in this very room, where I delve as deeply as I can into reflections on this subject, debating what a principality is, of what kinds they are, how they are acquired, how they are maintained, why they are lost. That is my most favorite passage from Machiavelli, and I'll tell you the 4 reasons why. But first, a quick tour. This is his house, and this is his private study, where he would return from the woods, return from his haggling and playing card games with his friends, and he would come read here for 4 hours every day. And he said that reading here, he would be teleported, transported into the courts of the ancient men who were his friends. Now, the first thing that I love about that anecdote must be how he took off. He was completely alone, right? But how, nonetheless, he took off all of his muddy work clothes and he put on his most fine and courtly and regal garments. Because I am famous for, I am infamous for, I've been mocked for having all of my guests in my audience wear their most courtly and regal garments in my videos. And the reason there is because you want to honor the subject you are discussing, right? And the reason we have such great production quality on all our videos is you want the gravity of the subject to be mirrored by the gravity of the aesthetics. Modernity often sees aesthetics and the innards, the essence, as competing. That if you go after a beautiful woman or a handsome man, they must be shallow. That if you're spending so much time on production, the content must have some kind of deficiency you're trying to hide. But the ancients, especially Plato, saw them as not just connected, but as one, that the beautiful is the good. The idea here is that beauty can lead us to the good because, unlike the other goods, beauty is striking in a way that, let's say, justice is not. When you see a beautiful man, a beautiful woman, when you see a beautiful landscape like this, you are stricken in a way that you aren't if you see a just city. And that striking quality of aesthetics and beauty can be a ladder up to the higher goods in life. So aesthetics, the outwards, are clearly not everything, but I think Machiavelli has the right idea when, again, he one-ups me for sure. Even when alone, he puts on his best clothes, right? You can imagine him tightening his tie or whatever tie equivalent they had at the time to read these great thinkers. Now, the second thing that I really like, and this goes into the good dress thing, he's dressing up as if he's about to meet his good friends because he treats the great books and the great thinkers who wrote these books as his good friends. And that's exactly how I feel. When you read these texts, you are building a kind of a relationship with these thinkers. It's not just a kind of information retrieval. I remember when I was in the most difficult parts of building my second company, long work days, I would come back home and I would lie on my couch and I would pick up Augustine. Okay, that was my drug of choice. There was a wonderful biography called Augustine of Hippo by Peter Brown. And when I read that, I felt like I was talking to a friend who understood me, who could comfort me. Because crucially for Machiavelli, right, he's a man who's lost everything, who was almost sentenced, he was sentenced to death, who almost died. But with his friends, these ancient thinkers who have died, he feels that they have invited him, they have accepted him, and that this is a safe harbor who he can be, who he actually is. And that's how I felt reading Augustine, because I was reading how Augustine at my age was very tracked in his career, and he, like me, had this constant pull towards contemplation. And so eventually he gave up this amazing career and then went all in on contemplation, which led to eventually his conversion. And that gave me a kind of support, as if a good friend was going through that, right? So that's the second thing I really like. And I suppose to add on to that, this is a contra-Platonic idea, or at least counter-Socratic idea, that I do think the great books are alive, in the sense that Phaedrus, one of Plato's dialogues, Socrates has a critique of the great books. He says that, he's a critique of writing, and he says that writing is bad because in conversation we can adapt our speech to different people, but writing is all the same. Okay? If you read the book, it's always going to say the same thing. It doesn't know how to adapt its speech to you. I couldn't disagree more. I think every time in my life that I've matured and have picked up one of these great works, it has a not completely different, but very much different language and very different message that it wants to send me. And furthermore, I think we can, if we know them enough, we can make our friends, these old thinkers, answer us. We can anachronistically ask Nietzsche, what do you think about incels? We can ask Plato, what do you think about technology? And have them give us an answer if we read them close enough, right? Now, the third point that I really like about that quote, and this is because I'm so gluttonous, is his analogy of philosophy as food. He said that he described those books as the food that is for me alone and for which I am born for. And this is actually not the only time that Machiavelli uses gastronomical metaphors for philosophy, for learning. He does it again in the discourses. He criticizes moderns who pretend they like the ancients by collecting a vase. And he says these people do not taste the flavor, the true flavor of the ancients. And what does he mean by this? What does the gastronomical analogy mean? The next line gives us a clue. He says that moderns only hear about the anecdotes of the ancients, but they fail to imitate it, okay? So what merely collecting vases, what merely collecting antiquities is to tasting antiquity, hearing is to imitate it. And there you have the answer about why food is such a good analogy for philosophy. You digest food. Food becomes part of you, just as imitation does. Philosophy is not a science, right? You're not after truth claims in philosophy. You're after truth claims that nourish a life. It's the integration, it's the digestion that helps. In the same way that it's no benefit if I have the most amazing feast on the table that you can't touch. Philosophy is useless, even if you got the truth statements, if you don't integrate it. Okay? That's why philosophy is described as food. And by the way, you can see Machiavelli's ambition even in the food analogy. He said, the food for which is mine alone, right? Uno solo, right? So his ambitions are strong even in eating. And finally, I would say that also the way that Machiavelli suggests we absorb it, right? To continue the food analogy, how do we digest the great books? How do we absorb it? It's by reconstructing. It's by reproducing. It's by summarizing what the ancients have told us and kind of repeating it back to them. This is my entire strategy when it comes to this project and the best way I found to learn the great books. Because I came from a math background, and in math, you're supposed to reconstruct proofs. That's how you understand things. And so I've taken the same approach to philosophy. So this project right here, the Great Books Project, is not an altruistic teaching project, it's a selfish learning project. It's because by interviewing these scholars, by preparing these lectures, by being forced to give a condensed summary of what I think the highlights of each of these books are, and again, basically memorizing the lecture each time, that is a way for me to digest it. And so it was so cool to hear Machiavelli echo the same sentiment. And reading this letter while at this house is like literally and figuratively being invited into the ancient court of a good friend.